My name is Stephen Bell, and I shall be talking today really about the effects of land drainage, the cost of land drainage, whether it's really necessary, and the sort of effects that you can expect if you do go and spend your money on a drainage system. The last couple of seasons when we've had heavy rainfall at times that, should we say, are difficult for the farming community, it's sort of highlighted the lack of drainage quite often, or the perceived lack of drainage by the farming community. Chris will be highlighting the condition of the soil, and that's probably the first thing we need to look at before we ever consider drainage. If you take an area like this, where I can guess at probably the average annual rainfall is something like 40 inches, that's the equivalent of 1 million gallons of water on an acre every year. Now that's a lot of water on a relatively small space, and we need to think then what happens to that water when it gets to the surface. And the first thing we need to do, as Chris will tell you, is to make sure that as much infiltration of that water takes place as possible. If we can't get that water to go down through the soil profile, then it comes off as surface runoff, and you've seen the flooding problems that we've had. So if we're looking at drainage systems, we're looking at drainage of grassland here today, it's not a cheap thing to do. We're looking possibly in terms of capital cost of maybe £5,000, £6,000 an acre. So we need to look at all the other factors before we decide to go and spend that amount of money. So firstly, we'll look at the soils, as Chris is suggesting. We make sure the soils are in good condition, that we have reasonable percolation down through the soil profile. We look at any existing drainage systems that we might have. Are the ditches in good condition? Are the existing drainage outfalls clear? Are the drains clear? Do they need rodding? Do they need jetting perhaps to ensure a decent flow out through the drain? So before we really go and spend all that money, we need to make sure that all these other factors are in place and they're in good condition.
Last year, 2012, was a nightmare for an awful lot of people. Here on a farm in Pembrokeshire, fairly heavy ground, and last year in all that rain, soil really suffered. A lot of poaching damage, a lot of machinery damage. I walked this farm tail end of last year, and there was lots of evidence of poor soil. Swards were opening up, and there was a potential that this field was going to go backwards very quickly unless we did something with it. In March, I brought in a Grassland subsoiler just to try and lift the soil and break up some of the compaction areas. And for the last 6 months, I've been measuring grass growth following the treatment we applied to see how effective it was. And basically the Grassland subsoiler has come through at about 9 inches in depth. They wrongly call it a subsoiler. I'm nowhere near a subsoil, but I am under the problems. And the problem I had was a layer going down to about 7 inches that just wasn't letting water through. So all the time I was getting water sitting on the top, which leads to a build-up of organic material and roots in the top, very little underneath, and all the sward was just starting to peel off the top. And I can see all these blocky structures here, and rust deposits, iron oxide, just indicating that I've got temporary water logging for a few days at a time. And what Sward Lifter was going to do is basically break all this lot up and try and improve water movement down through the soil so it can access the drains and away. So say it came through at about 9 inches and disturbs all this area of soil, and then I get another run at about 60 centimetres apart. So I've still got some intact parts of the field, but all this lot has been disturbed and broken up so water can move down the profile. In terms of how much grass we grew, we did it in March, fairly close to grass growing, and we actually lost a bit of grass for first cut. We grew 20% less grass up here than the lower end of the field where I hadn't lifted, purely from the physical damage of going through the machine. But for second cut, I grew more grass. About 15% more grass up here. So there is an effect, and we now monitor to see how long that effect carries on. You know, I can see I've now got roots right down at 9–10 inches, busting through those pan layers. So I would hope now that this field will be rejuvenated and kick on, and we'll still get decent grass next year. I'd hope that we wouldn't have to go back in and lift again for maybe another 2–3 years. But the secret is always dig your holes, look, and see what's going on, and monitor what you grow. You know, it's not cheap to run up and down machines and diesel. I want to know it's done a job and it's effective so I can do it again. If it pays, use it. If not, I'm just wasting money.